In this video, I'm going to tell you about how I created a Chrome extension that I can use in my stream manager on twitch.tv to change the color of the lights in my background here. So here's a small example that I recorded. So this is just an example of the lights changing within my stream manager. The right light right now is green, the left one is yellow. I've got a channel point set up for each, so I'll take the right one, I'll make it red. I'll take the left one, I'll make that one blue. And you can see it automatically clears it out of the reward queue, and it just automatically happens. There is an occasional issue with my redemption of these, that if I have it set to a time limit and I type in something here, it will often tell me that it's out of stock before I submit it. But for other users, they don't have to have that issue because the extension is running in my browser. I can also submit nonsense in here, and if it doesn't find one of these colors, it will just pick a random color. And there you see, it's yellow. There are a few parts of this, and it wasn't set up all at once. The first was getting the lights set up. I'm using LIFX lights. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not familiar, but I'm guessing that like the Philips Hue and other lights that are similar might work. I don't remember or know the necessary steps that I took to get it set up, but there was instructions that came with the light bulbs and helped me figure out how to set it up with my phone. After it was set up on my phone, I made sure it was all working, and then I set it up with a couple of if this then that triggers on the if this then that website. Again, I followed a guide, and this was quite a while ago. It involved setting up webhooks and triggers, and I couldn't even tell you how I did it, but it worked. The end result is that I can call a specific URL from if this then that and pass it a color as a query string, and it'll change the light for me. Each light has a different URL, so they can change independently. I had this set up for a while, and I never really did much with it. I got it set up using some commands with Nightbot. However, I did want to put it into a channel points so that I didn't have to tell everyone like, hey, there's a command for you to do this, and it was a fun interactive way to use your points on my stream. In Nightbot, the bot would just fetch the URL and pass the parameter as a query string, which is exactly what needs to happen. It sat like that for quite a while. No one ever used it because I never advertised that there was a command for it. So that brings us to my extension. I know that there's an API from Twitch and much better integration with Twitch extensions, but I'm not familiar with them, and getting something working quickly was my goal. So for me to begin testing, I opened up my stream manager page and I made the point redemption queue visible. With the queue open, I redeemed a few of each light with different colors and a couple of other channel point redemptions that I have available. Once I redeemed a few, I opened up the developer console and I found the classes that I needed to get the point queue, the class for each redemption item, and the button that I would need to complete that reward. I wanted to mark them complete after I was done doing the reward because I don't want it to trigger multiple times for each redemption. This has the added benefit of keeping my reward queue empty so that my code can be simplified to always look at the first element in the queue. I did this because I'm lazy, but then I wouldn't have to worry about any looping or anything like that. So in the channel points section, I set up a redemption for each light, and I have predetermined a hard-coded string of items that people can choose from, and if they don't choose one of those, it'll pick a random color, but those are the pre-populated colors with LIFX lights. I set them to a 2-minute cooldown so that the light was consistent for a little bit and it wouldn't really waste anybody's points to redeem them by having somebody overwrite it immediately. I also didn't know if there was going to be a lot of issues with how many calls I was making to the if this then that website, and so that was another way to kind of limit how many were made. So in the code, I'm basically doing the same exact thing that the nightbot command was doing. I'm fetching a URL and I'm passing the color chosen as a query string. As we walk through the code, you'll see that I have a lot of validations to make sure that I'm grabbing the correct elements and making sure that the text matches what I need it to match or want it to match. So this is what it usually looks like for something to be redeemed, and what I do is I check this text right here for which of the left or right or neither light to change, and this text right here for a specific color. And then I click this button and mark it as complete. All of this happens automatically within a fraction of a second. So this queue is always empty. If any of these other things gets redeemed, it will mark it as complete, but it won't actually do anything. You'll see that later. So this is the manifest file. As you can see, there's not a lot here. I make sure that it only runs on the dashboard page of Twitch TV, and it basically just loads the JavaScript when the page loads. So here's the first part of the JavaScript file. I have a function name, an array of the available colors, the color that somebody chose. My div is the redemption queue, the reward queue main body. So when something is added, it's added to this item here. And then I have some validation. I check that there is an element. The next one is the text that says what was redeemed. In my case, the right light, the left light. The next one is the complete button. I will need that to mark it complete when I'm done. If it's a reward that doesn't require a text input from a user, it will not have the second element that I'll need for what color of light to get. And in that case, it can't be the light reward, so I can just disregard. Next check is to make sure that it is the reward that I want. If it's the right one or the left one, the code is identical. The only thing that changes is the URL that it fetches, and everything else is the same. Here, I'm getting the actual text that a user entered, and if it is one of the available colors, I set it to the color that they chose. If it's not because they typed it wrong or they didn't want to choose a color, I will pick a random one with this function here. Next, fetch the URL. I believe you can use get or post and it'll work fine. I use post. It was very important to specify no cores. I do not care what the response is. I do log it, but I don't actually care. The reason I don't care is because I just send the request to if this then that, and it should change. I'm not expecting any input back. The reason no cores is important is because this URL that I'm calling is not the same site as Twitch, and if I try to retrieve information, I get a big error. I'm sure there's a way around it. I don't know it. It doesn't matter because I don't need any input back. If you did, you might have to find a way to do that. And then I click the reward button that it's done. That will clear it out of the queue. So the remainder of the code is it's really, I'm sorry about it being disjointed like this. All of these else's are if it didn't have a child node because it was a different reward type, or if the text was actually a different reward type that did utilize user input. And then down here is a very important part, creating a mutation observer. In my case, I'm observing the entire document and all children and child nodes of it. So whenever anything is added to the document, this right here, this code will fire, and it'll give a little list of mutations of what changed. So every input into a text box, every time you use a button that brings up a new menu, it'll give you a list of mutations. So that's what all these checks are. The mutation type for adding a child node to the reward queue is a child list. I need to make sure that it was a mutation that added a node, not changed text or anything. I needed to make sure that it added a node that had some more nodes underneath it. I don't remember why, but that was important. And something I could check for. And then finally, I needed to make sure that where it was added was part of this redemption queue body that I'm looking at. If all of those things match, I call my function and you saw the code already, it'll pick the first item and run through. So as you can see, I have a little bit of extra superfluous code with the mutation observer. I did try to get it to watch just the reward queue body, but I could not get that working. Most of that seemed to be because when I wanted to observe, when I wanted to attach the observer, that element, the reward queue element, didn't exist yet. None of the workarounds that I tried functioned to get rid of that issue. Now you see how the code works. There are some drawbacks. The pros are obvious. I got it working. It was pretty easy to do, and it functioned. It does what I want. The cons are that if there's any changes to the Twitch stream manager, if they change any of their classes, any of their HTML structure, that might break the extension. I don't know how often that changes, but for now it's fine. I can't get anything back from the if this then that fetch call that I make. For now, I think that's fine. The reason that's kind of important is if this then that website was down, for instance, I wouldn't know that. It could return a 404. It could return anything. I wouldn't know that it was not working, except seeing that the light behind me doesn't change. Another big one is it requires the stream manager to be open. I always have that open. It uses resources, but it's not a huge deal. I already have it open. I just include the reward queue tab now. I do know that it also requires having your channel points, the reward, set up to go to the queue. I know that there's an option to skip the queue completely, which I believe would make this not work. Another big drawback with the way that I have it coded right now, there's a lot of hard-coded values. I'm the only one using this code. If I was going to continue to develop this and make it better, I'd probably make it more modular. I think the way that I would do this is I would have an options page that holds all the variables. So what URL you want to call, the name of the reward that will call that URL, query strings that can use user input. Another thing that might be an issue if that is the case is having the autocomplete and relying on the first element in the list. That might be an issue if you were getting a lot of redemptions, but I don't know. Mine are on 2-minute cooldowns and they don't happen that frequently, so it hasn't come up. If 10 users tried to submit the same thing over and over, maybe it would get jumbled up in there and wouldn't work so well. I don't know. I did not test that. But that's my code. That's my sweet extension that I made. I'm really proud of it. Hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching.